The car's headlights cut through the thick fog that blanketed the winding country road. Sarah and her friends, Mark, Lisa, and James, were on their way to Blackwood Castle, an old and abandoned fortress rumored to be haunted. The group had been friends since college, and this trip was meant to be a thrilling adventure. Sarah glanced at the ancient map in her lap, tracing their route with her finger. "We should be close," she said, her voice tinged with excitement and a hint of apprehension. The dense trees on either side of the road seemed to close in, casting eerie shadows that danced in the headlights. The car emerged from the forest, and the imposing silhouette of Blackwood Castle loomed ahead. The castle, perched on a rocky hill, was a dark mass against the night sky. Its tall, crumbling towers and ivy-covered walls gave it a foreboding appearance. The group parked the car at the base of the hill and climbed out, staring up at the eerie structure. "It looks even creepier than I imagined," Lisa whispered. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the faint sound of a distant owl. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine as they began their ascent to the castle. They found the castle's library, a large room filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Most of the books rolled and covered in dust, their titles barely legible. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, and an ornate chandelier hung from the ceiling. Sarah ran her fingers along the spines of the books, intrigued by their age and mystery. Mark picked up an old leather-bound journal from a table and opened it, revealing pages filled with handwritten notes and strange symbols. "Looks like someone was doing some serious research," he said. Lisa shivered as she felt a cold draft pass through the room. As they explored further, they entered a long corridor lined with suits of armor and faded portraits. The air grew colder, and the atmosphere felt heavy. Suddenly, Sarah stopped, staring down the hallway. "Did you see that?" she whispered. A shadowy figure had briefly appeared at the far end of the corridor before vanishing. The group tensed, their flashlights darting to and fro. "It was probably just a trick of the light," James said, though his voice wavered. They continued down the corridor, now more alert and wary. Mark noticed a small, almost invisible door hidden behind a tapestry. Curiosity piqued. He pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Guys, check this out," he called. The group gathered around the entrance, their flashlights piercing the gloom. "Should we go down?" Lisa asked nervously. "We have to," Sarah replied, her sense of adventure overcoming her fear. They descended the creaking stairs, the air growing colder and damper. At the bottom, they found a hidden room filled with strange artifacts and ancient relics. In the center of the room was an old, ornate chest. James carefully opened the chest, revealing a collection of old, yellowed documents and peculiar items. Among them was a large, leather-bound book with strange markings on the cover. Sarah picked it up and opened it, revealing pages filled with ancient text and eerie illustrations. "This looks like some kind of spellbook," she said, her voice hushed. As she flipped through the pages, a sense of unease settled over the group. The air seemed to grow thicker, and a faint whispering sound filled the room, though they couldn't tell where it was coming from. Desperate for answers, Sarah suggested they try to communicate with whatever was haunting the castle. They found a dusty, old table in one of the rooms and arranged chairs around it. Using a makeshift planchette and a piece of paper with letters and numbers drawn on it, they began their seance. "Is anyone here with us?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. The planchette moved slowly at first, then more decisively, spelling out yes. The room grew colder, and the candles they had lit flickered violently. "What do you want?" Mark asked. The planchette moved again, spelling leave. After the seance, the group felt a renewed sense of urgency to escape. They decided to split up to search for another way out. Sarah and James went upstairs while Mark and Lisa stayed on the ground floor. As Sarah and James searched the upper rooms, they encountered a spectral figure of a woman in a long, flowing dress. Her eyes were hollow, and she seemed to be trying to speak. "Help us," Sarah whispered, but the ghostly figure only pointed towards a door at the end of the hallway before vanishing. Following the ghost's direction, Sarah and James opened the door at the end of the hallway, revealing a hidden passage that led down a narrow staircase. Meanwhile, Mark and Lisa found an old map in the library that seemed to indicate a secret exit. They rushed to find Sarah and James, and together, they descended the hidden staircase. The passage was dark and damp, the walls covered in moss and the air thick with moisture. They could hear distant whispers and footsteps echoing through the narrow space. The hidden passage led them to a series of underground catacombs beneath the castle. The walls were lined with ancient tombs and eerie statues. The air was colder here, and the sense of being watched was overwhelming. As they navigated the labyrinth and tunnels, they stumbled upon a large chamber with a central altar. Strange symbols were carved into the stone floor, and the remnants of old rituals were scattered around. "This must be where the hauntings originate," Sarah said, her voice echoing in the chamber. With the spirits banished, the atmosphere in the castle changed. The oppressive feeling lifted, and the cold drafts ceased. The group hurried back through the catacombs and up the hidden staircase. Finding the main doors of the castle now unlocked, they rushed outside into the dawn light, breathing in the fresh air with relief. "We did it," James said, hugging Sarah tightly. The castle, now silent and still, loomed behind them. They knew they had ended the haunting, but the memory of their terrifying night would stay with them forever. Weeks later, Sarah and her friends gathered at a local cafe, reflecting on their experience. They had done extensive research and learned that Blackwood Castle had been cursed centuries ago, trapping the souls of those who died there. By performing the ritual, they had freed those spirits. "It's hard to believe it actually happened," Lisa said, sipping her coffee. "But we have the evidence," Mark replied, showing the photos they had taken in the castle. They knew their story would be met with skepticism, but they had lived through it and come out stronger.